I still remember that rain, the kind that doesn't fall hard, just whispers steady on the windshield, like it's trying to prepare you for something you don't want to see. It was early evening, the kind of gray light that makes the world look like it's holding its breath. I had a casserole on the seat beside me, my daughter Patrice's favorite, baked chicken and rice, with just a hint of rosemary. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and I'd been missing her, something fierce. So I thought, what harm could it do to surprise her? That little white house on Maple Lane was supposed to be a dream come true. I bought it with my retirement savings, every penny I'd put aside after 50 years of raising other folks' babies. I wanted Patrice to have something of her own, a place no one could take from her. That's what mothers do, right? Build safety where there was none. But when I turned into the driveway, something didn't sit right. The yard was full of cars I didn't recognize, loud ones, with out-of-state plates. The porch light was on, but the curtains were drawn tight, and from the outside, I could hear laughter that didn't sound like my daughter's. I sat there for a moment, heart thumping, fingers tight around the steering wheel. Evelyn, I told myself, don't be silly. Folks visit, families change. Still, my gut said otherwise. You learn to trust that gut after 65 years on this earth. I grabbed my umbrella and casserole, stepped out into the rain, and walked up the porch. The moment I knocked, the laughter stopped. Just like that, like somebody had pressed pause. The door opened slow. A young woman I'd never seen before stood there, holding a baby on her hip. She looked me up and down with that kind of confusion that don't belong in your own doorway. Can I help you? She asked, her tone polite but cold. I'm here to see my daughter Patrice, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Before she could answer, I heard a soft sob from somewhere inside, and that's when my heart near about stopped, because I knew that sound. I knew my baby's cry, even if I hadn't heard it in years. I pushed the door open just enough to see her, sitting at the kitchen table, hands in her lap, tears streaking her face. Behind her stood an older woman in a fancy silk robe, talking sharp, like she owned the place. Patrice, I whispered. My daughter looked up, eyes wide, like she'd seen a ghost. And the older woman turned to me with a frown and said, "Excuse me, Mom, but this is our home now." Right then, the rain outside started pounding harder, like heaven itself was listening, and I realized, the home I gave my daughter, with love, wasn't hers anymore, you know? People think time softens things. They say once you've seen enough years, the pain gets dull around the edges, like an old photograph. But I've learned time doesn't heal what you never faced. It just folds it up, neat and quiet, till one day life unfolds it right back in front of you. That night, when I drove home from Patrice's house, or what used to be hers, my hands shook so bad I had to pull over. And while the rain kept falling, memories came back clearer than I wanted them to. See, I wasn't always Miss Evelyn Grace, the woman folks call when their babies need raisin. Once upon a time, I was just Evelyn from Macon, Georgia, a young girl with a head full of hope, and hands that never got a rest. My mama used to say, "Baby, we may not have much, but if you got love and hard work, you got enough to stand tall." I believed that. I built my whole life on it. I started working as a nanny when I was barely 19. First for the Crawfords, a family so rich they had 2 refrigerators and a piano nobody touched. Their baby boy, Matthew, was my whole world for those first few years. I rocked him to sleep, sang him lullabies I learned from my grandma's porch. Every child I cared for after him, little Julia, sweet twins Caleb and Kara, they all carried a piece of my heart. But while I was busy raising everybody else's children, my own little girl was home with my sister, Patrice, my bright, beautiful Patrice. Lord, that child came into this world screaming like she had something important to say, and she always did. Smart as a whip, that one. She used to draw pictures of houses, big ones with porches and flowers and happy people standing out front. One day Mama she'd tell me, "I'm gone, have a house like that, and you won't have to work for nobody." I'd smile and kiss her forehead, whispering, "Long as I can visit, baby, I don't mind working." But the truth was, I did mind. I minded every Christmas morning I missed, every birthday I watched from the sidelines, every report card I found out about weeks later. By the time Patrice turned 16, she'd built a quiet wall around herself, polite but distant. "You love other people's kids more than me," she once said. It broke me in a way I couldn't show, but I couldn't quit. We needed that money. The Crawfords were paying my bills, and Patrice's school tuition depended on me showing up every day with a smile. Years went on. Patrice grew into a young woman who didn't ask for help, didn't share her feelings. She went off to college on a scholarship, called every now and then, but the gap between us stretched wider than miles. I told myself she was busy, that she'd come back around when life slowed down. When I finally retired at 65, my body was tired, but my heart was restless. I'd saved up enough to live comfortable, not fancy, but decent. And I wanted to make something right before my time ran out. That's when I saw the house on Maple Lane. White siding, little porch swing, magnolia tree out front. It looked just like the ones Patrice used to draw. I remember standing there with the realtor, sunlight hitting the windows just right, and I thought, this is it. This is my apology, wrapped in a roof and 4 walls. I called Patrice that night, told her I wanted to buy it for her, a gift, no strings attached. She tried to refuse at first, her pride kicking in, but I could hear the tremble in her voice when she said, "Mama, are you sure?" I told her, "Baby, a mama's love, don't retire." When she finally said yes, I cried right there on the phone. That house became my way of saying, I see you, I'm sorry, and I love you. The day we closed on it, Patrice looked happier than I'd seen her in years. She'd just gotten engaged to a man named Darnell, a smooth talker with church shoes and a salesman's smile. He held her hand a little too tight, but I pushed that thought away. After all, a mother wants to believe her child's happy. They moved in a few weeks later. I helped unpack boxers, labeled kitchen drawers, even planted marigolds by the mailbox. Darnell's family came by once, his mama and 2 brothers, and I remember how his mother looked around the house, sniffing like she was checking its worth. "Nice place," she said, her lips pressing together like she'd tasted something sour. "I'll lucky to have it." Something in her tone bothered me, but Patrice was beaming, proud to show off her new home, so I held my tongue. For a little while, everything seemed right. Patrice called often, told me about paint colors, recipes, and how happy she was settling in. She'd laugh and say, "Mama, I finally feel like I belong somewhere." But then, about 3 months ago, her calls slowed down, texts got shorter. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd say she was just busy. I told myself not to worry. She had her own life, her own rhythm, until that day it rained. The day I showed up with baked chicken and hope, and found strangers sitting in her kitchen. Looking back, maybe the signs were always there, the hesitation in her voice, the shadows in her laugh. I just didn't want to see them. I thought love could fix what time had broken. But the truth was, the home I gave her wasn't just bricks and paint. It was a second chance, and somebody had taken that from her. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. The image of my daughter sitting at that kitchen table, her shoulders hunched and eyes red from crying, played over and over in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that woman's voice again. "This is our home now." I must have prayed 100 times before dawn. "Lord, whatever this is, show me the truth, and give me the strength to face it." By morning, my decision was made. I was going back. I told myself I'd just drop by again, maybe bring breakfast and some flowers, pretend like nothing happened. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just visiting. I was investigating. The next afternoon, I drove back to Maple Lane. This time, I parked down the street, just far enough so they couldn't see me coming. I sat there for a while, watching. The house didn't look like the one I bought. New curtains, new cars, loud voices spilling from the porch. A man, I recognized as Darnell's brother, was sitting out front, smoking and laughing into his phone. Something about it made my stomach twist. When I finally walked up, Patrice opened the door herself. She looked startled, her eyes puffy, her voice quiet. "Mama, you shouldn't have come back." "Now, don't start that," I said softly, handing her the basket I'd brought. "Just came to see how my baby's doing, and maybe have some tea." She hesitated, then let me in. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt different, heavy, like sorrow had settled into the walls. The living room was cluttered with boxers and toys that didn't belong to Patrice. There were shoes by the door that were too big for Darnell's feet, perfume on the counter that wasn't hers, and the smell, a mix of fried onions, cigarette smoke, and something sour underneath. Patrice led me quietly to the kitchen, whispering, "Please, Mama, keep your voice down. They don't like surprises." The word hit me like a slap. Before I could ask who they were, Darnell's mother walked in. She didn't greet me, just gave a tight smile and said, "Oh, the lady who bought the house, nice of you to drop by." Something about the way she said bought, slow, deliberate, made me feel small, like she was reminding me of my place. I smiled back anyway. Yes, ma'am, I did. For my daughter? She didn't answer, just went to the stove, stirring a pot of beans like I wasn't even there. I turned to Patrice and whispered, "Baby, what's going on?" But before she could speak, Darnell came in, grin wide, eyes sharp. "Mama Evelyn, good to see you. You didn't tell me you were stopping by." He kissed Patrice's cheek, but his hand lingered too long on her shoulder, almost like a warning. We sat at the table for a few minutes, awkward, quiet. I tried to make small talk, ask about work. Patrice kept answering in short sentences, her eyes flickering toward Darnell and his mother like she was waiting for permission. But when I noticed the stack of envelopes on the counter, unpaid bills, mortgage notices, and a letterhead from a bank I didn't recognize, my heart started pounding. After a while, Darnell's brother came in, laughing loud, saying something crude about free rent. His mother hushed him, but not before I caught it. Free rent. Something wasn't right. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead slipped into the small office I'd helped Patrice set up when she first moved in. Inside, half the drawers were empty. The framed photo of me and her on her graduation day was gone. In its place was a pile of unopened mail. Curiosity got the best of me. I opened one envelope, a property tax notice, and my heart dropped. The name on the owner's line wasn't Patrice's, it was Darnell Washington. I felt dizzy, the room spinning. I clutched the counter just to stay upright. That's when I heard Patrice's voice from the hallway, low and shaky. "Mama, please, you can't fix this." I turned around, tears already welling in my eyes. "Fix what, Patrice? What did he do?" She shut the office door quick, whispering, "He said he needed to reorganize the paperwork for taxes." I didn't understand what he meant. I just signed what he gave me. I thought it was a refinance. Turns out, he transferred the deed. My knees near gave out. "You mean, he took the house, the one I bought for you?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Mama," he said, "it's still ours. He just put it in his name till his credit improves." "Baby, that's not love," I whispered. "That's control." Before she could answer, the door opened. Darnell stood there, smiling too wide. "Everything okay in here?" Patrice froze. I turned, straightening my back like every mama who ever had to protect her child. "Just mother and daughter talking," I said. He looked between us, eyes narrowing. "Good, let's keep it that way." That night, I went home shaken. I tried to call Patrice, but every time, she sent it to voicemail. I left message after message, begging her to come stay with me. But days went by, and nothing. Then one night, around midnight, my phone rang. Patrice's voice was small, broken. "Mama, I can't take it anymore." I sat up in bed, heart thumping. "What's he done, baby?" She sniffled. "It's not just him. It's his family. They moved in, said we can save money together. But Mama, they treat me like the help. His mama tells me how to cook. His brother drinks on my porch, and I don't even recognize my own home." I closed my eyes, tears spilling. "You listen to me, Patrice Grace. You go to your room, lock that door, and you wait. I'm coming." By the time I reached the house, the lights were on, and voices were raised. I could hear Darnell shouting, his mother yelling back, Patrice crying. I didn't even knock. I walked straight in. "What's going on here?" I demanded. Darnell turned, eyes blazing. "You can't just walk into my house like that." "Your house," I said, stepping closer. "Boy, that deed may have your name, but the roof was bought with my hands, my money, and my prayers. Don't you ever forget that." His mother stood up then, sneering. "You gave it as a gift. That means it's hers, and she's his wife, so it's his, too. You don't have any say here." Patrice stood behind me, shaking. I could feel her breath on my shoulder, quick and shallow. I turned to her gently. "Baby, you don't have to live like this. Pack a bag, we'll leave right now." But before she could move, Darnell slammed his hand on the table so hard the dishes rattled. "She's not going anywhere." The silence that followed was thick. Even his mother looked startled. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but firm. "You can't cage a woman's spirit, Darnell. You may have tricked her on paper, but you won't keep her soul trapped in these walls." For a second, I thought he'd lunge at me. His fists were clenched, jaw tight. Then he just laughed, low and cold. "Old women should mind their own business." I left that house that night, but not without a plan. Over the next week, I started digging. I went down to the county clerk's office, pulled property records, and found the paperwork myself. Sure enough, The transfer was filed under Darnell's name, signed by Patrice and notarized by one of his cousins. Fraud, clear as day. But I knew if I told Patrice too soon, she'd defend him. So, I waited. I gathered proof, printed every document, highlighted every date, and then I called an old friend, Mrs. Henson, the lawyer I used to work for. When she saw the papers, her lips pressed tight. "Miss Evelyn," she said, "what they did is illegal, but getting it undone won't be easy. You'll need your daughter to stand up for herself." That was the hardest part, because Patrice was still caught in that web of love and fear. When I went back a few days later, the house was even more crowded. Darnell's brothers, lounging on the couch, his mother giving orders, Patrice moving around quiet like a ghost. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Dinner's almost ready, Mama," she said softly. I looked around and realized she was cooking for them, not herself. She wasn't a wife in her home anymore. She was serving like she didn't belong. That broke me in two. After dinner, when the others went outside, I pulled Patrice aside. "Baby, I know the truth now. He took your house, but we can fix this. I have a lawyer ready to help." She shook her head, whispering, "He'll get angry. You don't know what he's like when the doors close." I held her hands tight. "I do, child. I've seen that kind of man before, and I've seen women rise above him." Her lip trembled. "Mama, I'm scared." I pressed my forehead to hers, whispering, "Courage don't mean you're not scared. It means you walk through fear holding love in your heart." That was the first time I saw a spark come back into her eyes. Over the next few days, we planned quietly. Patrice hid her important papers, ID, birth certificate, bank cards, in a bag of flour in the pantry. I told her when the time came, she'd know, and that time came faster than either of us expected. One evening, I was sitting on my porch when my phone buzzed. Patrice's text said just 3 words, "Mama, it's time." I wish I could tell you that night passed quietly, but it didn't. I tossed and turned, every creak of the house making me jump. Around midnight, I heard the front door creak open. My heart stopped cold. I sat up, clutching my blanket, ears straining. Then I heard whispers, male voices. I moved to the hallway, my old knees protesting, and peeked from the top of the stairs. It was Marcus. He wasn't alone. 2 men stood with him, their flashlights cutting through the dark like knives. They were moving boxes out the door, boxers with my daughter's handwriting. I froze, my mind racing. They weren't just moving his things in, they were taking hers out. "Man, hurry up," one of them whispered. "She's at her mama's place." We got till dawn before anyone notices. I felt the floor tilt under me. He was emptying my daughter's home, right under her nose. The house I'd given her, her safety, her fresh start, was being stolen in the dark. Without thinking, I shouted, "Marcus, what do you think you're doing?" The flashlight swung toward me. My voice echoed through the hall like thunder. He froze at the base of the stairs, eyes wide. "Miss Etta, you shouldn't be here. Don't you dare Miss Etta me," I said, gripping the banister for balance. "Put those boxes down right now." He looked between the men and me, jaw tight. "This isn't your business." "Oh, but it is," I said, taking one step down, then another. "That's my daughter's home, my grandbaby's memories. You don't get to decide what happens here." The air was thick with tension. One of the men muttered something about leaving, but Marcus raised a hand. "Go on," he said quietly. "I'll handle her." They slipped out, leaving us in the dim light of the living room. He looked at me, that false politeness gone. "You don't understand, Etta. This is mine now." She gave it to me. I blinked. "What did you just say?" He shrugged. "She signed it over. Said she didn't want to deal with no more drama." My stomach churned. "You mean she was forced to sign it? You manipulated her?" He took a step closer. "She's my wife. What's hers is mine." That's when I saw it, the faint red mark on his cheek, like someone had slapped him. My daughter had finally stood up to him, and he didn't like that one bit. "You touched her," I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't answer, just clenched his fists. Something inside me snapped. 65 years of being polite, careful, deferential, gone in an instant. "You lay one more hand on her," I said, stepping closer, "and I'll make sure you never get near this house again." He laughed, low and bitter. "Lady, you can't do nothing. You're just an old nanny with a big mouth." Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the front window. Tires crunched on gravel. My daughter's car. Marcus's eyes widened. "She's supposed to be at your place." "She was," I said, "but I guess the Lord had other plans." The front door burst open. My daughter stood there, hair tangled, eyes red but blazing with fury. "Get out, Marcus," she shouted. "Right now." He spun toward her. "You don't mean that, baby. You're upset." She pointed toward the door. "I mean every word." Behind her, 2 police officers stepped into the light. My heart nearly burst with relief. Marcus froze. "You called the cops." She nodded, voice steady. "You stole from me. You hurt me. And you threatened my mother." The officer stepped forward. "Sir, we need you to come with us." He hesitated, then lunged toward her, but before he could reach, one officer tackled him to the ground. The other read him his rights, while my daughter stood trembling, tears streaking down her face. I rushed to her side, wrapping her in my arms. "It's over, baby. You're safe now." But she just sobbed harder. "Mama, I'm sorry. I was so stupid. I thought he loved me." I stroked her hair. "Love doesn't make you hide or cry. It doesn't steal your peace." They took Marcus away that night. The 2 men who helped him were found later, trying to pawn off furniture that belonged to my daughter. It turned out, Marcus had been planning to sell the house entirely, pocket the money, and disappear. As dawn broke, the house was quiet again. The air felt cleaner, lighter somehow. My daughter and I sat on the floor of the empty living room, our backs against the wall. She looked around, voice trembling. "I can't believe I almost lost it all, Mama, the house, the kids, even myself." "You didn't lose it," I said softly. "You just forgot who it really belonged to." She frowned. "Who? You, baby, not him, not anyone else. This house was your chance to stand tall, and you did." The morning light spilled through the window, turning the tears on her cheeks into something almost shining. She reached over and took my hand. "How did you know to come back, Ma?" I smiled faintly. "I didn't. Something in my chest just told me you needed me." Sometimes a mother's heart knows before her mind does. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirp of birds. The house that once felt stolen began to feel like home again. But beneath that calm, something shifted inside me. I realized how fragile peace can be, how easily it's broken when trust is misplaced. Later that morning, while the police finished their reports, one of the officers turned to me. "Ma'am," he said, "you might have just saved your daughter's life tonight." I smiled sadly. "That's what mothers do, son, even when their children are grown." As the sun climbed higher, I walked out to the porch. The street was quiet, just a few neighbors peeking from behind curtains. I took a deep breath of that cool morning air and whispered a prayer, not for revenge, but for peace. When I turned back, my daughter was standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Come on, Mama," she said softly. "Let's sit a while." I joined her on that old porch swing, the wood creaking under our weight. We didn't need words. The silence between us said enough, that we'd been through the storm, and somehow, we were still here. And as the morning light washed over us, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I hoped that maybe this pain had a purpose, that maybe love, the real kind, could still live in this house again. The days that followed felt like walking through the aftermath of a storm. The air was still heavy, but the thunder had passed. My daughter's house, our house, sat quiet and sunlit again, though traces of what happened lingered in the corners. A broken picture frame, a scuff on the wall where Marcus had thrown something in anger, the smell of fear slowly fading, replaced by coffee, lavender, cleaner, and the faint hum of peace returning home. I stayed with her for a while after that night. She needed company, not the kind that talked too much, but the kind that stayed, steady and quiet, like old roots holding the soil. I cooked breakfast in her little kitchen again, just like I did when she was a girl. Grits and eggs, nothing fancy. The kids, my grandbabies, came running to the table every morning, their laughter bouncing off the walls like sunlight on glass. It was the kind of sound that heals things you can't see. One afternoon, I found her sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the yard. The wind was soft that day, the kind that carries secrets and forgiveness in its folds. I sat beside her, holding 2 mugs of sweet tea. "Mama," she said quietly, "I feel so foolish. I kept thinking I could fix him, that if I just loved him enough, he'd become the man I hoped for." I took a slow sip before answering. "Baby, love can build a home, but it can't patch up a man who refuses to hold a hammer. Some folks see kindness as weakness, and they mistake your giving heart for a doormat. That's on them, not you." She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. "I lost so much." I reached over and took her hand. "Maybe. But you also gained something you didn't have before, yourself. And that's worth more than any house, any marriage, any promise broken." We sat like that for a long time, watching the kids chase each other through the yard. For the first time in a long while, her smile reached her eyes. When I finally packed up to leave a few weeks later, the house looked different, not because the furniture had changed, but because she had. There was light in the windows again, and laughter in the air. She hugged me tight at the door. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Mama." I smiled. "You'd do just fine. You're stronger than you think." She pulled back, eyes shining. "You think I'll ever trust again?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "Trust don't mean forgetting, baby. It means healing enough to open your heart without letting someone trample it again. One day, maybe, you will. But until then, trust yourself first." She nodded, and I saw the woman I'd raised, still bruised, but no longer broken. That night, back home in my little apartment, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The city lights twinkled below, and somewhere in the distance, a train rumbled by. A sound that's always reminded me of life's movement, even after loss. I thought about the families I'd cared for all those years, the children who grew up and forgot to call, the mothers who cried in kitchens when no one was looking, the fathers who tried but didn't know how to love softly. I've seen enough to know that love isn't always gentle, and truth isn't always kind, but both are necessary if we're ever going to be free. That night changed something in me, too. For years, I'd blamed myself for not being able to protect everyone I loved. I thought being strong meant staying quiet, bearing pain so others wouldn't have to. But that night, standing in that living room with Marcus, I learned something. Silence can protect evil just as much as it can protect peace. Sometimes, speaking up, no matter how late, is the only way to stop the bleeding. A few months later, the court finalized everything. Marcus pleaded guilty to theft and intimidation. My daughter kept the house, her name shining proud on the deed once again. She started going to therapy, joined a women's support group at church, and little by little, she began to smile without flinching. When she called me on Sunday mornings, her voice sounded lighter. "The kids are doing better, Mama," she'd say. "They're sleeping through the night again." And I'd close my eyes, whisper a prayer of thanks, because healing doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in those small, ordinary moments when laughter returns to a home that once echoed with fear. One afternoon, I visited her again. The porch had new flowers, petunias and marigolds, and wind chimes that danced with every breeze. I stood there for a while, listening to the music they made. "Mama," she said, coming out with a smile, "I was thinking about repainting the living room, something bright this time. Maybe yellow." I grinned. "Yellow's good. Sunshine never hurt nobody." She laughed softly. "You know, every time I sit here, I remember that night, but not the bad parts. Just you standing there, strong as ever. I think that's what gave me courage." I reached for her hand. "Courage isn't never being about not being afraid, baby. It's about showing up while you're afraid. You did that." She squeezed my hand. "You taught me how." I didn't say anything after that. Didn't need to. The wind said enough for both of us. Now, sitting here, telling you this story, I can still see it all so clearly. The flashing lights, the broken glass, the trembling hands. But more than that, I see her standing in her doorway again, head held high, ready to begin again. I think that's what truth does. It breaks us just enough to rebuild us, right? And as I look back on my 65 years of caring for other people's homes, I've come to understand one thing. The greatest work a mother, a nanny, or any woman can do is to remind love where it belongs, not in houses or possessions or promises, but in the courage to walk away from what breaks you and return to what heals you. So, if you're listening to me right now, and you're sitting in the dark wondering if you'll ever find peace again, baby, you will. You just got to start by opening that front door and letting the light back in. That day, I learned that sometimes the truth may hurt, but it's the only thing that sets you free. And if my story touched your heart, my dear, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes the truth deserves to be heard.